Still a surprising amount of pushback on any AI tooling at all. I think a lot of companies are just about getting there with sort of Copilot. Like, should every company kind of be refounding themselves right now? All those things we believed last year or 2 years ago, they're still true now, because I think in a lot of cases they're not.
I'm joined today by Chris and Matt from Owner. Gitpod was successful, doing millions of dollars of revenue, 60 people, and they kind of completely refounded the company, bought a freeletter.com domain for it. So we're going to talk about how you managed to keep a 60-person org so nimble, how you go through the rebrand, and then talk about AI agents at enterprises, which is something that they're really focused on.
We've naturally gravitated towards a bunch of phrases that have owner in it that sort of have become synonyms for doing something. One is ask owner. So this naturally came about, it's not some designed phrase. We naturally started to go, I'm going to ask owner, or hey, just ask owner.
Yeah.
And it's become a synonym for go and figure it out, or have something else figure it out. And the other is owner's on it. It's the same thing. It's like, okay, stuff is getting done. Yeah, owner's on it.
Yeah,
you're fine, right? If we got those two as synonyms for owner, I think we'd be golden.
Yeah.
For me, I really want, hopefully, like, people to take away from that and also this podcast is, like, especially companies that aren't allowed to use AI tools for various like risk appetite reasons, like we can actually make that happen, which is where we're having a lot of success with like some of the large banks where regulation isn't completely lined out on some of these things yet. It's not entirely clear what tools they can and should use, and risk appetite is very low. Like they don't want to egress any of their source code or secrets anywhere, right? So being able to have like an agentic experience inside your own VPC, inside your AWS cloud is super powerful. We have conversations and they're like, oh, I just assumed we couldn't have this. I'm like, no, you can. Like we can do that. And so like getting that message out there is like something that we're going to be working hard to do. For part of the reason we're doing podcasts and things is like we want to get that message out,
Yeah. And so I guess the big question here, right? So you guys are Owner, FKA, formerly known as Gitpod. And Gitpod is like, I'd heard a lot of good things, been around for I think 5-6 years.
Yeah, 5 years about.
This is like you're doing well. So but you have rebranded. It feels like a pivot. I suspect you're about to correct me on this. Let's say you've just pivoted. That's a hard decision, like you got 60 people. That's not easy. Could you tell us about why?
It's definitely not an easy decision, and one that sort of took time to grow, let's put it this way. So we didn't just wake up one day and go like, let's rebrand. The reason we're doing that is to sort of reset the scene, reset the stage. So Gitpod, if you take the name and split it right in the middle, it's Git and Pod. Let's take the pod first. We famously left Kubernetes. We're no longer running on Kubernetes, which is something that we started with. And so the pod in the name simply is technically inaccurate. And then Git is very limiting to, just Git. And in reality, Gitpod or Owner is a lot more than that. The other thing is it means we no longer need to have conversations about whether to spell the P capital or not. And we're no longer being confused with GitHub. But in all honesty, really what's happening is the shift in how we write software is so fundamental that this extension, and we can talk at length about, be happy to talk at length about also what that extension is, but the trajectory that we're seeing Owner take and these two aforementioned reasons really were enough of a motivation to say, okay, we need a new name. We need to make it clear that it's not something new, but we're entering a new era of how software is written. And this is a good place to resolve the capital P problem.
To just kind of extend on that a little bit and why it's not a pivot is because everything that Gitpod was doing will continue. Like we still have this foundational platform where we can deploy developer workloads into enterprise VPCs. Like we also have now a cloud offering where you can use it too. And all of the agentic stuff really naturally goes on top of that. Like we're starting to bake it like more into sort of the primitives of what Gitpod was and what Owner will be. But it's not like we rebuilt all of the technology. Like this is just like a real natural extension of what we were already doing. The more you spend time with AI agents, like you become very wary of them, right? It's like did that just delete a file that I didn't want it to delete? Like, did it just make a change that I'm not comfortable with? Like, what is really happening here? Like, where's my appetite for guardrails? And it turns out like cloud development environments are really, really great primitives to put agents inside, because you can kind of think of it as like a little box, a little prison, right? Within there, it's fairly safe because it's ephemeral. If we don't like it, we just blow it away, right? And so that's really resonating with customers and people who were previously Gitpod customers as they move towards being owner customers too, that we can build on top of what we already had, enhance the capabilities, and give them the agentic story they didn't think they could have, because they don't have the risk appetite to use something that runs on a developer's laptop like Claude Code or even Cursor in some situations.
Scaling DevTools is sponsored by WorkOS. WorkOS helps you get enterprise ready. That means they give you all the things that you need to start working with enterprises. Things like audit trails, skim provisioning, role-based access control, and single sign-on. Let's hear from Utpal from Digger.dev, a dev tool using WorkOS.
We haven't had to think about auth at all. I think support is great. We have a Slack Connect channel with them. Issues, if any, there haven't been many, but anytime there have been issues, it's been addressed super quickly. So audit trail, SSO, stuff like that, we don't think about that anymore. Genuinely, we don't think about that anymore. And you don't necessarily think about these enterprise features, but they still lead to revenue. And it kind of is a no-brainer in that sense.
WorkOS helps your dev tool start selling to enterprises much faster. And they're trusted by dev tools like Cursor, Fal, and Vercel. If you use their user management auth, you can get your first 1 million monthly active users completely free. Yeah, could you maybe just explain what Gitpod was and what Owner is now?
So the way I used to describe Gitpod is it takes a developer 4 to 5 hours per week to set up and maintain their dev environment. We see that in studies and our own data. We reduce that to 10 seconds. And the way we do that is we take that typically outdated README and turn it into something that's machine executable, so that if you need to spin up a dev environment, you can do that at the click of a button. Fundamentally decoupling compute from automation. So it doesn't have to run on your laptop, it can also run in the cloud. And it's the automation piece that's really key, that lets you sort of instantiate multiple of these dev environments. One sort of very graphic mental model is like, think of laptops out of a tissue box. You want to work on something, you're pulling a laptop out of a tissue box, and it's perfectly set up for what you need to do, except without the environmental disaster that a laptop out of a tissue box would be. So you can get development environments very, very quickly. And that's extremely helpful for humans. And it turns out it's existential for agents. Because to Matt's point, if I wanted to run an agent locally, I would need to give it permission for everything it wants to do. I don't want this to go, I need to reset state. Let me reset the hard drive. That's not what I want to happen. Also, I don't necessarily want to give this thing arbitrary permissions when it runs next to my production access or my email. And cloud development environments are really helpful in that they provide this sort of natural space for agents to run in. So the way we give agents more autonomy is by giving them a secure space in which they can run. And the ability to instantiate many of these dev environments now also means I can have many of these agents running in parallel. And that's the real power of it, because as agents get more and more autonomous, we'll need to turn this autonomy into productivity. And the way we do that is by doing multiple things at once. If I now need to sit there and sort of babysit my agents, I'm not winning that much, right? Like I just exchanged one activity for another, but fundamentally it's my own attention that's really expensive. So if I can now give this agent its own space, let it run and not need to worry about it doing something that I don't want it to do, I can have multiple of these running without my laptop taking off because the fans go nuts. And also always in the perfectly set up environment. No faffing with Git work tree or I need a Python version of that and a different Python version here and a Go version there. It's just always perfectly set up, and agents and humans benefit from that.
One of the framings I always really liked for Gitpod was take the best engineer in the company's laptop and the setup and give it to everybody. Now everybody can have that set up on day one. So the way that shows up is, that time to first commit, like from an engineer joining the company to putting something in production can be minutes, because they don't have to worry about setting up the laptop. You open Owner and you go to a toggle and you toggle it right, and it starts spinning up an environment for you in the cloud. And the same thing that humans benefit from, like even in our own company, we build on top of our own platform. We have engineers join and are productive like on day one. And so then the thesis is, well, everything that makes humans more productive actually makes agents more productive too. Like having a ready to go environment where it's predictable, is, codifiable, and we can improve it for both humans and agents at the same time is like really, really powerful. The same controls that large enterprises have always wanted to have over sort of their workflows for engineers. It's exactly the same as you want for agents too. And so it's just like a really natural extension of what was the Gitpod platform into what will be the owner platform, or what is the owner platform, I should say.
And how have people been receiving it?
So I say that there are three groups of people that are worth considering. One is internally within the organization, within owner, and that's come quite natural. So for a long time we had a cursor mandate followed by a Cloud Code mandate, and we didn't need to mandate owner. We naturally saw a transition into owner. People just stopped using Cloud Code and started using owner, and so that reception has come quite natural because we saw, how these things naturally built on each other. For our customers and prospects is very similar too. A lot of them are asked to or see the need to have an AI story to get into this space. They very clearly see how organizations that employ agents are becoming more and more efficient, and they themselves need to do that in order to keep up or even lead the group. And with that, owner is very helpful because if you have it deployed already, you have all these primitives in place, you have all these foundations in place already, and we now can give you an agent that works really, really well, that builds right on top of these primitives that you may have been using for a very long time already.
And I think like we got onto it a little bit before, but I think you've talked a lot about how change is something that you've leaned into, and getting 60 people to kind of get on board with something that's, if not a pivot, a very strong change of focus, I guess. How have you been able to do that?
So I think fundamentally our focus has remained the same, actually. Like our focus is to provide great developer experience, to make developers more effective, to give them great tools and to make their lives better. A lot of organizations who buy Owner replace their VDI solution with Owner. And anyone who's ever written a line of code in VDI knows it's not exactly an enjoyable experience. So our mission has always...
Sorry, VDI is
virtual desktop interface.
Virtual desktop interface. Okay.
So, Citrix or RDP or something like that, a lot of lag, typically under-spec machines, locked down, not built for development.
Wow. Okay, so, and people, what are the main reasons that people do this, actually? Just as a sidetrack. Like, I think this is something that I've come across. I don't know.
It's control fundamentally. Yeah. It's fundamentally the need for specifically large and regulated industries to have control over where their development happens, what happens to their source code, what libraries someone can pull. And Owner with Owner guardrails provides the same amount of control, except in a much more effective and efficient package that also doesn't make the life of your developers hell.
Interesting. So I guess to the banks, this is how a lot of devs at banks would build.
This is, we've seen VDIs in a lot of places, and sometimes there's also a better together story. So there can be a world where it makes sense to run Owner and then access that through a VDI. It's still a lot better of an experience because you don't need to do the heavy lifting in the VDI, but you can do that in the cloud that actually has the horsepower to do it. So this is where a lot of folks have come from. And so fundamentally, the mission that we're on hasn't changed. You're
helping like the same people with...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're helping the same people in a very similar way. Yeah. Except that now, not only do we make their lives better, we also give them superpowers.
Yeah.
Because we're multiplying what they can get done in a day.
Yeah. And I guess in a way, it's just like software engineering changed. People didn't use agents before. Now they use them.
Now they use them.
Therefore, you should also offer that.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to talk about as a whole, because I've seen a lot of discussion about, like, should every company kind of be refounding themselves right now? And I think there's a pretty compelling argument that there should at least be a moment to pause to think about all those things we believed last year or 2 years ago. They're still true now, because I think in a lot of cases they're not.
Yeah.
And you can see this in even large enterprises. Like if you look at Salesforce, like they're really changing. don't say they're changing direction, but they're changing the way they work, and they're very clear about that outwardly, about how much they're embracing AI internally for their own productivity. You see sort of small startups now, they're always trying to figure out how they can enrich their product with AI. And I think the winners in this space will be the ones who do enrich their product with AI, not just like shove a thing on the side, right? If you end up in a situation where you kind of add AI and it doesn't really add extra value to your product, I think that's when you probably haven't reflected internally enough on, like, how does this fundamentally change our business? And so I know, even though it seems quite extreme to change the company name, I think if you did like a case study on a lot of other companies, how they're operating now versus how they did in, let's say, 2022, 2023, I think nearly all of them would be different, at least the ones that are being really successful. Like, they will have changed their org structure, like the way they operate, like the tooling they use. And like, we see that show up in a lot of conversations we have with our customers, because if they haven't done it already, they're trying to figure out how to do it. And like, owner is usually part of that journey, right? It's like, we want our engineers to be productive. We want them to have AI tooling because we acknowledge the productivity gains and benefits that can be had. We were kind of a bit cautious going into this market because our risk appetite isn't aligned with maybe some of the smaller companies or startups or people in different ecosystems. So we're trying to explore what we can do today. And that's when we can usually have a really great conversation.
Yeah. Well, one question I wanted to ask you guys is like how you see, because I can say from my perspective, so as like a, you know, like I was using, I think at the beginning of the year, I can't even remember, but I was probably using like, when did Cursor got popular like last summer, right? So it was like Cursor had like kind of a reign. And then I kind of started using Claude Code a lot. And recently I started to go back to Cursor, but use Codex a lot for kind of just simple things, send it off to Codex, create a pull request. And like, how do you see, I guess, people building and how they're using these tools? You mentioned being able to do a lot of things. And then B, like, how do you see kind of, because I guess you are to some extent going up against, you know, the OpenAIs of the world and Anthropics of the world.
So the way we reason about that is essentially as a mental model in 3 waves. The first wave is the way we've written software for decades, where every line was essentially artisanally handcrafted, save for autocomplete and code generation.
Yeah.
The second wave, which started about 2-3 years ago, Copilot, then Cursor, Windsurf, is that tap autocomplete. It didn't fundamentally change the pattern. If an engineer closed their laptop, work ceased to happen. But while the laptop was open, work happened quicker because you got that autocomplete. And the thing that changed with agents very fundamentally is that the pattern changed, because an agent, as long as it doesn't run on your laptop, once you close the lid, work still continues to happen.
Yeah.
And it's a very fundamental change in how software is written, in that it's no longer the human that is very directly producing code, but it's a machine that's doing it.
Yeah.
So we're really entering sort of this era of automation. It fundamentally changes the pattern. The interesting thing about agents is that agents themselves are a reasonably thin wrapper. I think Swix is quoted with, software engineers perceive agents as an LLM in a for loop.
Yeah.
Which is approximately right. I don't think it's doing it full justice, but it's not that far away. Fundamentally, it's a set of tools, the calling of the LLM, handling all the quirks of that, and then the environment in which it runs. And the former two, the tools and the quirks of the LLM, like, Codex is even open source. Like, there's a bunch of agents that do that, and that do that well. The real magic happens in the model, and the models are commodity.
Yeah.
So the only thing that's left to differentiate on is the environment, is the integration. And that's what we're going after.
Yeah. Model commodity, yeah, but debate.
Everyone has access to it. Everyone can get an Anthropic API key, and it's a level playing field.
True. So if you're competing with OpenAI, as of now, they're not giving themselves better access to better models. So that you would both have the same kind of intelligence.
I mean, OpenAI is to some extent at time, like the Codex models for a while weren't accessible through API.
Oh, really?
Like, some of these things do change and shift, but by and large, models, at least the way it stands today, are the great equalizer.
Yeah. And then, sorry, I interrupted you. So the differentiator is the environment.
It's the environment and the integration. So to Matt said that earlier, you know, so many of our customers come to us and are almost surprised that they too can have this experience that we offer. And it's really the way ONA is deployed and the way it integrates into your controls, into your VPC, into your organization that makes it work for large enterprises. And that's the part that's differentiating, is the fact that we can bring this experience to really big organizations that otherwise struggle to employ those tools and have a lot of shadow IT, because obviously engineers, you know, we want those tools, of course.
Sure they use it, or they try to.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, you know, they'll put that code into some cloud and some rack, whatever it is, and all of a sudden half of your controls fall apart. And, you know, you can try and fight that, or you can make it easy to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And ONA is making it easy to do the right thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's been a really sort of wild journey watching this play out, hasn't it? And like we can all try and be oracles and predict what happens next, and I don't think any of us can. But there was a ton of time where we all thought the models was the moat, didn't we? Like, models are the thing. And then it was that moment, was it DeepSeek? DeepSeek released, and everyone like panicked and paused for a moment. And went, are the models the moat? Because we've just had one open source that's like incredible and it's like meaningfully cheaper. And then we kind of went into this wars where people are flicking between Claude Code and OpenAI and DeepSeek and whatever comes next. And like switching costs are cheap, right?
Yeah.
Like most people have subscriptions to both. Like I have $10 here, $10 there. Like I'm happy to try everything. Or if not, I'll cancel my Claude subscription this week and I'll get an OpenAI one. And you see this show up on, you know, Twitter, especially if you're active there. Like the zeitgeist changes weekly in terms of what people love and how people are feeling about things. And so, again, once you kind of remove the models and peel it back and go, okay, let's say it's true that OpenAI have a model that's better than everyone else's. I think we're already at a point where there's good enough other models always, and you're getting into like very marginal 0.2, 0.5% better. Yeah. I think the latest release of Opus was like 1%, 2% on the SWE benchmark better. Like it wasn't the jumps we've been seeing. Yeah. Maybe we'll continue to see huge jumps, but I also believe if we do, another company will match them. And so if you peel away all of that, all you have left is like user experience, platform, where it runs, business requirements. You get back into sort of very standard traditional product management, right? What is the users need and how do we solve it? And the models are one of the things that we need to solve some of our customers' problems, but there's all of this risk appetite, business requirement, contractual requirement, legal requirements around it that needs to be solved for. And we're incredibly well placed to solve that, especially if we stick to our guns of being neutral in all of this. Yeah. So like if you want to use that model, we'll find a way to help you support it in a way that matches your risk appetite. And so I think for me, that was the reason I joined ONA over all the other things I saw going on in the AI space, is because for me, it makes a lot of sense that somebody who provides a great integration experience and just kind of zooms out into more traditional product management of like, what is the problem we're seeing and how do we solve it? And how is AI part of that, but not the entire solution? It is really, really powerful, I think.
I guess you've kind of seen who buys, like, I guess the people that were buying Gitpod, you understand that user very well. And I guess like, it would be okay if like you haven't got like every startup in SF is using ONA, if like, because maybe the environment stuff is less important to them, but it probably seems like it would become a lot more important with like the more complex your organization is.
I mean, of course, we want every startup in San Francisco to use ONA, and you'd actually benefit from doing that too. You know, it's not just for the large organizations. They clearly have a lot of organizational and compliance controls that they need to put in place where ONA is immensely helpful. But even in my spare, I mean, I'm a bit brainwashed here, but even in my spare time, if I would use ONA just because it means I no longer have to, as someone recently put it, prostitute my laptop for agents. You know, it means now I can do this from my phone. One story I like to tell is I have a 3-month-old son now, and I spend a lot of time in the evenings once he's asleep and he likes to fall asleep on me.
Yeah, you can't move.
Exactly, I can't move. I definitely can't have a laptop here, but I can have my phone. And the way I frame that is I'm now 3 times more productive on my phone than I was 6 months ago on my laptop. And it's not necessarily, it's a bit hyperbole, but not much.
Yeah, I completely see that actually, because I've been sending off like, you just describe what you want. And I've been using
Exactly.
Codex mobile app, like ChatGPT mobile app, and like,
Yeah.
it is incredible. Do you guys have a app actually? Have you launched like a mobile app?
We haven't launched a mobile app. We had a big conversation about that, didn't we? And we're trying to figure out what the right thing to do was. But I think we've started out with the mobile form factor. So if you go to our mobile website, like everything works. It's one of the really nice things about cloud development environments is I see lots of people on Twitter trying to figure out how to get Claude Code to run from their phone so they can interact with it with a way. It comes for free with Owner because ultimately we're spinning up a box in AWS. And so you're just interacting with that remote box and everything's happening there anyway. So we very naturally just get mobile functionality, which is great. So for now, we're kind of experimenting because one of the really interesting things that we're still trying to form an opinion on the right way to do it is like jumping into like manual code edits on a phone. There's a few different apps that have tried a few different ways to do that. We don't love any of them. So we're trying to figure out what our opinion is on that and how we want that to show up. Once we figure that out, then I think we'd be, maybe explore apps as we get bigger. But like, I think you can get an awfully long way with a progressive web app and a mobile website these days. So probably stick with this a little bit longer. But once we get into maybe deeper coding experiences on the phone, that might be when we'll like, actually, let's see if it makes sense to get a little bit closer to what you can do natively.
Yeah, I actually interviewed a guy who has like the most popular Git mobile app in the App Store. And I don't know, like maybe it's going to actually be like a resurgence of like, this is actually like a lot of developer experience happens like on your phone.
I mean, we're seeing something very similar when back in the day when we started as a code review platform that gave you an IDE in the web. That's how we very originally started, and then very quickly realized that the actual problem to solve is the dev environment underneath all that. What's interesting now is that with agents, we're seeing a resurgence of having the IDE in the web. So the way Ona is built is really to sort of progressively engage with code. You can go deeper as you need to. Sort of at the first layer is doing multiple things in parallel. So you get a very precise, let's say, overview of what your different tasks, what's the state of your current tasks and how long will they still take, and really helping you sort of scale your attention across them. And then when you click on one, you get the conversation that is really designed to give you a maximum context in a very brief glance. You don't have to go and scroll up a whole bunch to understand where things are at. At the end, you also get a summary. And if that's not enough, you can either from within the conversation or in the sidebar, essentially open VS Code web right there and then. And it's full VS Code web. It's not some clone or some stripped down version, but it's actual VS Code. And the intent here is to make you feel at home. We're so used to VS Code or to a full IDE, but they're also quite heavy. Imagine doing 5 things in parallel and needing to have 5 VS Code windows open and trying to understand while you command tab between them which one's which.
Yeah.
Whereas by putting it in that same interface, you can very easily switch between these conversations and you're always in the right context and you can bring VS Code in whenever you need. And if you need to go one step deeper, there's a button in the upper right corner that lets you open this in Cursor, JetBrains, VS Code. You can SSH into that box and use VI if that floats your boat. So this ability to sort of engage with the code at the appropriate level is really important. And having the IDE in the web really makes so much more sense now than it did 5 years ago.
It all loops back to that theme about being like sort of the center of the way you work and integrations, right? Like I think a lot of the other sort of AI tools change the way you work, and sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But if you don't love working from the terminal, for example, like that seems to be the zeitgeist at the moment. People want to do that. It might not necessarily meet how you like to work. I always was a big JetBrains user. I spent a lot of time in Goland, and then changed to Cursor to use Cursor's AI models, but never really fell in love with VS Code, especially. Maybe it's just like muscle memory at this point, I can navigate very quickly around one. And so I think it's very, very powerful to position yourself in the center of however you want to work, we'll support you and we'll give you sort of tooling around it to be able to integrate with. If you are a JetBrains company and you've got like tons of licenses, please go ahead. We give you the ability to switch on and off specific IDEs at the organization level. So if you are a big company, it's like, I want a pilot cursor, like we can enable you to turn it on for a week and then turn it off, and you can gather some data and stuff like that. So very, very powerful to be in the middle of all this and to be a bit more like, we're not going to change the way you work. Like, we want to work with you the way you want to work, but here's some extra tooling and sort of agentic experience that kind of fits into your workflow rather than changes it.
Yeah. I do want to ask like kind of just a general question, because I guess you're seeing a lot of different, I don't know, I feel like we talked about dev Twitter, and a lot of it is just like people that, you know, it's like startups, right? Like a lot of it's like there's not so much, you know, enterprise stuff, right? What kind of, how are people adopting it right now? Like what is the status? Like are people, what's it looking like in the enterprise space in like AI?
That's a great question. So one of the things that what you're seeing on especially like dev Twitter, I would say is probably like the top 10% of people adopting things, right? They're right at the forefront there. They're very much early adopters at the top of the curve. One of the things we're seeing a lot in our conversations is, I think a lot of companies are just about getting there with sort of Copilot. Like they're starting to think about like how Copilot can fit into their workflow. Still a surprising amount of pushback on any AI tooling at all, as in like, we don't really know how to think about this yet. We don't know how to reason about it. We don't know how it's going to show up in our company. Like we're not sure that what people are doing over there applies over here. So I think a large amount of what we do in some of this is almost like educate a little bit too, and show what is possible, what's capable, what tools are out there. One of the real challenges we have is there is, you know, in every company, there's going to be those people who are in dev Twitter, and they want to use all this crazy, like literally just came out bleeding edge AI tooling at work. And so actually we love it when those people exist, because they can actually help us navigate the conversation and say like, well, you know, if you want to do that at home, we can help you bring that to work too, but we can help you convince your boss that like this actually makes sense for you, and that it can work within your company. And it's not just for startups, it's not just for small companies. So something we do have to spend time doing is like marrying up these few things where there's like enterprise risk appetite, so like what the company wants to be true, and then what the engineers want to be true. And then if we can get ourselves like in the middle of that conversation, we do a really good job generally. But finding the right people to kind of connect all those things off is quite challenging. And so you almost end up kind of helping companies navigate their own org chart a little bit, which is really challenging, but it's very rewarding when you can figure it out.
Yeah, I always remember like I did some enterprise sales back in the day, and it was always funny when you're like, oh, but you guys already have an initiative to do this thing like over in there. And they're like, oh, do we? Like, and it's like, you just think that they would know what's going on in their company, but sometimes you have a better view on it. It's kind of.
Yeah, I think that the theme of two speeds we find play out at different scales over and over. So one is, you know, you got dev Twitter, which is really sort of plugged in, forward leaning, sometimes critical of things that are happening, but generally really sort of at the forefront of that wave. And then you have most engineers out there who are not dev Twitter who still believe Copilot is the pinnacle of AI tooling right now. And the same plays out within large organizations. I was really surprised to see that specifically enterprise organizations really understand that AI is a fundamental game changer. Like at the leadership level, the moment you get into boardrooms and C-level, the conversation isn't, do we need AI? The conversation is, how do we get AI in here quicker? That's the conversation.
So they do see it.
They do see it. And they also see the potential that has, and they also see the risk that it has. Like, it's really difficult to sort of outperform a Fortune 500 company, but they also see the innovator's dilemma and that they're big and potentially slower than others. And AI is this crazy accelerator that now, you know, makes it possible for a small team to take a serious chunk out of someone's business.
Yeah.
And they see that. And at the same time, they're facing exactly the situation where a lot of the engineers don't yet see it, and where their own compliance requirements might make it hard to act on this desire to roll out AI-based dev tooling, specifically agents. And that's really where we can be very, very helpful, because we can bring these controls and we can bring this efficiency that folks seek. And we've seen this play out with several of our customers where there was excitement in the forward-leaning group that Matt just spoke about. And there was excitement at the C-level where they saw that we need to bring this tooling in, and we help connect the two and bring them together in a way that actually works for these organizations.
Chris and I will spend quite a lot of time with our customers, like both engineers and C-level, to do this. And I think that's a pattern I think we'll see more. I think you will see engineers being part of deal cycles and go to market because it makes sense. Like you are, like how often do we hear we want to speak engineer to engineer, and they want to have a conversation with, like, there's a lot of hype in this space. I want to cut through it. Can I speak to someone who is using it? Like, I want to speak on a bit more technical level, what they're seeing, what they're feeling. And like, I think that's something you should lean into is those engineers in your company who are inclined and are power users, like, let them speak to your customers. Their passion will shine through like a lot. And I think that's really powerful.
I'm hearing, like, I don't know if it's just like random, but it feels like people are talking a lot about like forward deployed engineers a lot more than they were. Like,
absolutely. We're seeing that too.
Yeah,
we do.
Which I think makes sense because, I mean, the sort of the biggest thing I read about this was like OpenAI were hiring a whole bunch of forward deployed engineers specifically, which again makes sense. Like, they're talking about joining companies and like fine tuning models and like really helping them deploy AI. But I think if you zoom out like one step back and think about what you're kind of putting an agent in to do and hopefully scaling out so you have lots of agents doing work, is you're kind of fundamentally changing the way you work in your business, right? And so there's going to be lots of controls you need to put in place. There's going to be lots of advice you want to seek very quickly that's very scoped to your organization. And so having someone who's, if you've committed to purchasing a product or like an agentic tool, and you want to make sure it's successful. So one thing we talk about often is nobody buys like a dev tool, especially in a large company, and not wanting it to be successful. But part of our role is to make sure you are. It's not just like, oh, we've sold you it, you've signed the deal, like we'll see you in 12 months. Like, it's no, we need to do this together, and like, you're in, we're in, let's figure out how to do that. And I think forward deployed engineers as a title is quite an interesting way to explore how you can make that possible. It's like, we'll take someone who would maybe traditionally be in our engineering team. Like, we'll put them inside your company, especially for the larger contracts. And their entire job is to help you be successful. Like, if you're missing a feature, we'll figure out how to scope it out for you and maybe build it out. If you've got some specific questions about how you can use it and best practices, like, we'll plug you into our other customers and help you figure that out too. And so I think it's really compelling. And I think we'll continue to see more and more of this.
Do they, I actually don't know much about the role. Is it like, they typically like forward deployed engineer will just be like, if you start working with like a Fortune 500 company, they'll basically be there like 5 days a week.
I think the beauty of the role at the moment is it's kind of up for grabs a little bit, depending on the company. You can kind of shape it a little bit into what makes sense for your company. But I think in incredibly large enterprises, that would make a lot of sense. At least for a period of time, they would spend 4 or 5 days a week with the company as if an extension of their engineering team and be the bridge. I think hopefully as that relationship matures and gets stronger and the understanding of the product exists within the company, you might find they can be on 2 accounts perhaps. But generally, it's an extension of their engineering team that bridges into the companies.
A lot of what that role needs to do is really navigate the organization. So we call them forward deployed engineers, and there's a lot of engineering that needs to happen. But there's also an equal amount of understanding the needs and desires and fears, to some extent, that exist within that organization that they're becoming a part of. And there are fewer things that work better than having them batched in and be part of the coffee kitchen conversation. So it's incredibly important that they really become embedded in that organization, get as close as they can and as compliance permits, so that they can effectively help that customer and navigate that change that is happening.
Amazing. Are you guys hiring forward deployed engineers if anyone's listening?
We are hiring forward deployed engineers.
Nice.
We do.
I think that's all we've got time for. So I just wanted to see if there was anything that you wanted to point people towards. And you've got a nice .com domain now.
That's right, 3letter.com domain. So head over to owner.com and sign up, try it out. Very excited to see how this works for you.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Chris and Matt, for coming on, and thanks everyone for listening.
Pleasure.